the MCAT Cars podcast, session number 24. The Cars section of the MCAT gives thousands of pre-meds nightmares every night. Whether you're an ESL student, lack confidence while reading, or a slow reader like me, Jack Weston and the medical school headquarters are here to help you score higher in every section so you can be confident you're ready to get the MCAT score of your dreams. Welcome to the MCAT Cars podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join myself and Jack Weston today. If this is your first time joining us, thank you for taking that time. You are one of over 1,000 students who now listen to this podcast on a regular basis. If you have not done so yet, I would love for you to tell your friends about this podcast. You know those friends who are constantly complaining about how hard the Cars section is. Go and let them know that this podcast is out there for them for free. Let's go ahead and jump into our podcast episode today, our article today, all about distraction. Jack Weston back for some more MCAT Cars podcasts. I want to know if you've ordered any of those fancy bananas. I forget the name now. It's been a couple weeks. I forget the name of them.
What is it? Candivate? What is it? Cavendish?
Cavendish, yeah, Cavendish bananas.
Anyway. I think I've probably ate one or two.
All right.
So yeah.
Awesome. And you like them green, like we were talking about before.
Yeah,
I think we recorded that part. So let's talk about our passage today. I think last week you mentioned that this was going to be an interesting passage. So let's talk about why you think that.
This passage isn't really about reading skills. We're not really focused on reading skills today. For this session.
So I'm going to do well.
Oh, well, you're always going to do well. You're a rock star when you read these things. But in general, I think students have an issue with focus, how to stay focused. And I think, when we were going through kind of articles to use, even though this isn't really at the level of the exam, I really like the point, the message that they're giving to us. So I'm hoping that, when students read this or listen to this, they're going to really take it at heart. Now, usually when you read these passages, you want to stay very objective. You don't want to really, you don't really want to change your opinion on things and be swayed one way or the other while you're reading a passage. You do want to answer questions based on the author's opinion, based on how the author believes things are happening. But for this passage, I'm more concerned about you. Can you get the big picture and really, does it resonate with you as you go through your life, the day-to-day interactions you have throughout your life with people and technology, etc.? So I think this passage will help you if you really take it to heart, because it will really make your life a little better, I think, in my opinion. Given how technology is so omnipresent, it's everywhere in our lives. It impacts us at such a deep level, and I think it's going to be an interesting and very informative article.
Okay. All right. So if you want to follow along, again, in your podcast app, you can swipe over, find the description with a link and passage there, or if you're on the website, follow along there. First paragraph. It is difficult to imagine life before our personal and professional worlds were so dominated and, quote, switched on via smartphones and the other devices that make us accessible and, crucially, so easily distractible and interruptible every second of the day. I forgot what I was reading. My cell phone dinged and I had to go get it.
All right, read it again.
No, I'm just kidding. That's exactly what the sentence is saying. You
totally got me there.
So basically saying, look, cell phones are dominating our world, and the key word I think potentially here is crucially are distracting us and interrupting us every second of the day.
That's the exact problem. When students are reading these passages, are you really turning off your phone? Are you really focused on what you're reading? And not only that, but there might be other issues outside of just reading time, right? That could be the problem. All right, great. Go ahead.
This constant fragmentation of our time and concentration has become the new normal, to which we have adapted with ease, but there is a downside. More and more experts are telling us that these interruptions and distractions have eroded our ability to concentrate. So bringing in, quote, experts here saying that these distractions, these cell phones, eroding our ability to concentrate?
Great. So again, pretty straightforward. Basically, phones and stuff these interruptions are hurting our concentration, right? Maybe outside of the fact that, we're looking at the phone as we are reading something. Okay.
Okay. So finish this podcast episode and then go turn the phone off and go study.
Yeah.
All right. Next paragraph. We have known for a long time that repeated interruptions affect concentration. So the author is setting up, potentially talking about what we've known for a long time. Okay. In 2005, research carried out by Dr. Glenn Wilson at London's Institute of Psychiatry found that persistent interruptions and distractions at work had a profound effect. So we're given a name here, Dr. Glenn Wilson. We're given a location, the London Institute of Psychiatry. We're given a date of 2005, and basically saying that they have a profound effect, these distractions. Mm-hmm. Those distracted by emails and phone calls saw a 10-point fall in their IQ, twice that found in studies on the impact of smoking marijuana. All right. So distraction by emails and phone calls are worse than marijuana.
Can you believe that? That's crazy. That's insane, right? So I think most students are having a heart attack right now. Oh my God, I got to throw my phone out the window.
And go smoke some weed. No, that's not what we're advocating for here.
Right. Okay.
More than half of the 1,100 participants said they always responded to an email immediately or as soon as possible, while 21% admitted they would interrupt a meeting to do so. So they're pointing out potentially the effect of these distractions, that people are interrupting what they're doing, including a meeting, to respond to something immediately.
Okay.
Constant interruptions can have the same effect as the loss of a night's sleep. Wow. That's crazy.
That is really, yeah. Okay. So what's the big picture here?
That constant interruptions are bad for us.
Yeah, it messes us up, right? Yeah. And again, that's kind of the issue that most students have, right? They can't stay focused. And I've noticed this. I mean, over the past 10 years, generally speaking, I find that students are more prepared in terms of just understanding the ideas of the passages, but they have a harder time keeping focus. And that probably is due to cell phones and technology. I don't know. But, in this case, it kind of seems like that is the issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
go ahead.
Nicholas Carr picked up on this again in an article in The Atlantic in 2008, before going on to publish his book, The Shallows, 2 years later. So we're given another name, Nicholas Carr, 2008, so a couple of years later, The Atlantic, and then he wrote a book, The Shallows. So we're not sure what he picked up on again, but figure it out. Immersing myself in a book or a lengthy article used to be easy, he wrote. So he's saying he used to be able to concentrate. Long articles and books he used to be able to read. My mind would get caught up in the narrative or the turns of the argument, and I'd spend hours strolling through long stretches of prose. So giving us an example of his concentration. That's rarely the case anymore. So the contrast there. No, not anymore. Now my concentration often starts to drift after 2 or 3 pages. So giving us an example of how his concentration has gotten worse. I get fidgety, lose the thread, begin looking for something else to do. So kind of the extent of what's going on.
Right. What do you think most students end up doing when they're losing focus on these passages? Right.
All of those things.
We're probably looking at the timer. They're probably thinking about how they're bad at this, right? It's probably just because you got to keep your focus, got to just keep your concentration. And it's tough when the passages are boring and there's pressure, right? So, this is something to think about.
Yeah. I feel as if I'm always dragging my wayward brain back to the text. So again, just more example of how he's feeling.
Wayward brain.
Yeah.
That is such a great description of how most students feel when they read Carr's passages. I think that's like the exact way that most students feel. It's like they're dragging their brain to read this stuff, right? Yeah. Okay.
The deep reading that used to come naturally has become a struggle. Interesting. So it's interesting. I think I'm going to start a new MCAT course called Ditch the Social Media. Like, that's how we're going to get back into this, is to not be distracted anymore. You need to go off social media for 3 months before you test.
But I don't, that's a great point. But I always think about this, do you really want to quit cold turkey? Do you really want to like stop all social media? I think it's got to be a balance. I think a little bit of anything is okay.
Yeah.
But what happens, and this is totally the fault of these social media companies, is they make these things habitual. They make them addictive, right? You just want to keep scrolling. So you got to, one thing I recommend to students is just delete the app from your phone. If you delete the app, then you have to download it again and log in again, and you have to go through all that work if you really, really want to, use social media. And after you're done using it, delete it again. The harder you make it for yourself, the less likely you are to do it.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. If you feel like doing it and you're off that day, go ahead by all means. But balance, right? Keep discipline here, especially for those 3-4 months.
Yeah, exactly. All right. The impact of interruptions on individual productivity can also be catastrophic. So interruptions on productivity. Now we're getting into productivity, not just concentration. In 2002, it was reported that on average, we experience an interruption every 8 minutes, or about 7 or 8 per hour. So you can kind of quantifying our interruptions. In an 8-hour day, that is about 60 interruptions. Simple math there. The average interruption takes about 5 minutes. So that is about 5 hours out of 8. Wow. So basically, we're screwing ourselves with all of these interruptions.
Right. Okay.
Wow.
And I forgot to ask what was going on in the last paragraph. Like what was the big picture of that last?
So big picture was just concentration. And it was specifically this one person, Nicholas Carr, talking about his concentration.
Right. Example. It's kind of an example, kind of like some person who agrees with this statement, this argument. Okay.
Okay. And if it takes around 15 minutes to resume the interrupted activity at a good level of concentration, this means that we are never concentrating very well. So that last sentence, that 15 minutes to resume, I've seen the research on that it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to get back to the kind of the workflow you were in.
Right.
And so when you do the math like this, it's ridiculous, like how we're just never at our peak level of concentration.
Yeah, and then you get hungry after you get interrupted.
Yeah. Like, at least, what's on Netflix right now? I forget. Oh man. Okay, so this one's just all about interruptions and how we're not productive at all because of
concentrating very well. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In the last paragraph here, in August 2018, research from the UK's telecoms regulator, Ofcom, reported that people check their smartphones on average every 12 minutes during their waking hours, with 71% saying they never turn their phone off and 40% saying they check them within 5 minutes of waking. Yeah, that's me. So we have research here basically saying we're checking our phones every 12 minutes, never turning off our phones, and we check them as soon as we wake up.
Okay.
Both Facebook and Instagram announced they were developing new tools designed to limit usage in response to claims that excessive social media use can have a negative impact on mental health. So it's kind of funny, right? We were just talking about how these apps make them addictive, and now there's this kind of big backlash, and the app makers, Facebook in this case, are saying, "Oh, we're going to help limit usage."
Yeah,
I don't believe them.
Yeah. I mean, if you update your iPhone, it'll tell you like how much time you've been on your phone the day.
The screen time.
It's pretty scary.
It's pretty gross.
It's pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's terrible. So yeah, I mean, it's a nice feature, but I wonder why they did it, right? Probably to seem like they're on our side, right? But for all we know, they're just...
Well, there's been huge, specifically for Apple, there's been huge pushback from board members specifically saying that the phones are too addictive. So yeah, and it's interesting. Like Steve Jobs was notorious for saying that he would never let his kids have the technology that he was creating.
Yeah, that is really something.
Tells you something.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a passage basically like making me feel so guilty about how much I use my phone. That's what I took away from this passage. That it's just basically is that distractions and our ability to concentrate and be productive are just gone.
That's it. Concentration, productivity, that's it. That's it. And, this could be an MCAT passage, but it'd be a lot easier. And usually the easier ones are at the end of the test because they realize how essentially you might lose time earlier on. And if you're losing time earlier on, you're going to have, issues with the last passage, which is technically easier and could be solved faster if you did have that extra time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So yeah, we're done here. So just I hope students can realize how important it is to not use your phone every minute of the day.
All right, so there you have it. Now I want you to go shut off this podcast, go put your phones down, delete your Facebook app and your Twitter app and your Instagram app, but then you'll miss all those fun posts from me. If you don't follow me on Instagram, Medical School HQ, that's where I'm at. Go check me out. You really need to pay attention. So this one, it's an interesting article because we're breaking it down, we're learning CARS skills, but it is also a rude awakening into how detrimental our devices can be for us. So try to limit as much as possible, especially leading up to your exams, so that as Jack was talking about, you're sitting there reading a kind of boring passage or maybe a hard passage, your mind doesn't start wandering because that's what it's used to doing. So I want to thank you for taking the time again to join us here. Go share this podcast with your friends, with your classmates, with your advisors. Let them know it's out here for free for them to listen to. Have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the MCAT CARS podcast.